What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another episode of the Kingdom Crew podcast. I am your host, Josh Fann of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com. And today I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Michael D'Arcy of KC Sports Report. Michael, man, what is up? This is the first time we've talked since the Kansas City Chiefs' thrilling win over the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL season opener last Thursday night. What a game, man. I mean,
Yeah.
how are you feeling? How are you doing, man?
Josh, I'm feeling great. And honestly, I think that we'd be having a very different tune if the Chiefs weren't able to hold on to win that game. But the Chiefs were able to survive and advance, so to speak. And they started their season off 1-0. And coming off of last year where you lost this game, it feels pretty good to start 1-0 and not 0-1. But, I think that we're going to talk about it in this podcast. There were so many storylines from just that one game that it seems like we've got content for days. I mean, we saw so much impressive stuff, some stuff that maybe not was so good, but, the storylines just coming from this game are too much to not talk about.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to start with the fact that the Chiefs literally won by an inch. They won by an inch. Now, of course, the Ravens would have had to go for two if they wanted to win. That would have only tied the game, but I think we all expected them to go for two. And based on how they were moving the ball on our defense, there's a good chance that they would have gotten it. The defense is always at a disadvantage in that situation. I feel like your back is up against the wall. But the Chiefs come out with a win, and I really think they left a lot of points out on the field too. And I feel like they played maybe like a C+ game on offense. It was good. We got to see Rashee Rice really break out, in his first game as, that number one receiver we all think he can be. Xavier Worthy had some flashes. We'll talk about that. But I thought there were some execution issues from the offense that led to them leaving some points out there on the field. But we also have to remember that this is a very good Ravens defense, one that on paper a lot of people think is the best defense in the league. They had the number one defense last year. It's a lot of the same guys that they brought back, but their efforts just weren't good enough to beat the Chiefs yet again, Michael. And I kind of point to Lamar Jackson if I'm a Ravens fan, because there were several big-time throws in this game that he needed to complete, and he just missed them, including that one to Zay Flowers in the back of the end zone where he was wide open, and he just missed them. He flat out missed them. And it's stuff like that if I'm a Ravens fan, I'm always going to shake my head at and wonder, when's it going to happen for Lamar Jackson when he has that big signature win, that big signature moment? And yeah, it's week one of the regular season, so maybe it's not considered a signature moment, but this is a team that I think the Ravens wanted to make a statement against, losing to them in the AFC Championship game last year, and it just didn't happen. There was several throws in this game that Lamar there was one that should have been picked off by Chamari Connor. There was another one down the sidelines that Jalen Watson was able to bat down. And then, again, just the one to Zay Flowers in the back of the end zone. That's the one that people are still talking about, Ravens fans in particular. And then, of course, all the Ravens players all of a sudden decided that the rules no longer applied to them and that it's still a touchdown even if your foot's out of bounds.
Yeah, that's not how that works, Ravens fans. Yeah, Josh, I think you make a great point. I think that this is something that I have been saying for a long time, probably prematurely, but Lamar Jackson is just the kind of guy that cannot make the big throws when he is called upon. I think that overthrow to Zay Flowers in the back of the end zone is the perfect summary of what Lamar Jackson's career has been. He's an electric player with the football in his hands when he's running the ball. He torched the Chiefs on the ground running the
over
ball.
100 yards.
I think he had like 120-something. But when he was forced to make a throw to beat the Chiefs defense said, hey, throw on us. Beat us that way. He couldn't do it. And I think that's not something you magically get better at. That's not something that you can just improve overnight. It's either you've got it or you don't. And so Lamar Jackson has proven during his NFL time that he doesn't have it. And it's just the same thing every single year. And so that's why I'm not really worried if the Chiefs do face off against the Ravens in the playoffs, because Lamar, push comes to shove, he's not going to make the big time throws when he is called upon. And like you said, the Chiefs left multiple touchdowns on the board. The Ravens practically played horribly offensively, And, it felt like, they should have had less points. So I really think that the Chiefs are just by far and away a better team. And part of that is because Lamar Jackson is just not the guy in crunch time to get this Ravens team over the hump.
Yeah, and the one big signing that a lot of people thought would push the Ravens over the edge in this matchup was Derrick Henry, having him in that backfield. And he looks pretty mortal to me. 13 carries for 46 yards, and he had the touchdown on the opening drive. But after that, you never really thought anything of his performance. And not only do I think Derrick Henry's a guy that the Chiefs defense has kind of figured out with Steve Spagnuolo at the helm, but I also think he looks a step slower. Now, he was always a guy that took a little bit to get that full head of steam. He's bigger. He doesn't accelerate as fast.
Like 260 pounds or something crazy like that.
Yeah, but I mean, he's built like a defensive end essentially. But the thing is, he looked slower to me. Like, he looked noticeably slower to me. And that signing doesn't maybe scare me as much as it did when it was first made. Not that I ever thought it put the Ravens over the Chiefs in any aspect, but I just was not impressed by him. And if I'm a Chiefs fan, it's like, look, you didn't have Hollywood Brown. You left a lot of points out on the field. Mahomes threw a very uncharacteristic interception to end the first half, and that was probably a 10-point swing because the Chiefs, I thought, were going to move the ball and score, and then the Ravens turn around and kick a field goal. And, the Chiefs, they still won by 7 after what I thought was a lackluster performance. And then, defensively, they weren't perfect. The Ravens were able to have 452 total yards of offense. And I want to say Nick Bolton made up for over half of those for the Ravens offense. I mean, just targeting him in coverage. And we talked about that before the game, that was going to be an area that they attacked. And that was one of Bolton's. Bolton's always been a guy that's weak in coverage, but that probably was his worst game as a Kansas City Chief against the Baltimore Ravens.
I talked about that on my channel because that's something that all I saw on Twitter is that Nick Bolton's trash. He's garbage. And he's not a good coverage linebacker. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but to act like he is just not worth playing out there is ridiculous. Like, for as bad as he was in that game in coverage, when the game was on the line and Isaiah Likely caught that ball, who was there to push him out of bounds? It was Nick Bolton. So, push comes to shove, he is there to make the big time plays. And he has been one of the better linebackers that we've had in recent memory. We're not too far removed from the days of Anthony Hitchens and Damian Wilson. And I think that Nick Bolton is 100 times upgrade over those two players. So yeah, he might struggle in coverage, but listen, everybody has some sort of deficiency. And if we're going to blame anybody, it's Steve Spagnuolo's fault for putting him out there like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say. I think he's being put in a position to fail, and he's being asked to do things that he shouldn't be asked. And I understand that the Ravens offense is still going to try to exploit that, and they're still going to try to get him in those matchups where they can get him in coverage. But there's been times where Nick Bolton has been a lot more effective in coverage, or has been a lot more effective as the Chiefs hide him on the defense from having to cover anyone down the field like that. I mean, this is a guy that was one missed call from the refs away from being Super Bowl MVP for us and made a plethora of third down stops in Super Bowl 57. Nick Bolton is not the problem on this defense. I don't think he will be the problem going forward. Is he going to have his moments? Sure. Good and bad, but he's still an integral part of this defense, and Steve Spagnuolo likes him. He trusts him. He's very important when it comes to getting guys lined up and recognizing the play that's coming. And I still think he's a valuable member of this football team. And I think the conversation is getting a little carried away when it comes to Nick Bolton.
And it's ridiculous because the Chiefs won. I would understand if the Chiefs lost and Nick Bolton got torched for a couple touchdowns, kind of like what we saw from Dan Sorensen a couple years ago. But it's not like a Dan.
It's not. Yeah, it's not that bad. Yeah. Now like that game, yeah. Sure, you could put it up there with some of Dan Sorensen's really bad games, but this isn't Dan Sorensen.
Well, I mean, the issue with Dan Sorensen is Dan Sorensen was nowhere near the football, but even then, it's not that big of an issue. He struggles sometimes, but like I said on my channel, what he makes up for, or what he lacks in coverage, he makes up for in being one of the best pure tacklers in the NFL. He is one of the best downhill linebackers that you're going to find. I mentioned that, a couple years ago, he stopped Derrick Henry pretty much in his prime one-on-one when we had seen no other linebacker really be able to do that. And so the talent is there. Like there's no denying the talent is there. It's just maybe don't put him in a position where he has to run with a running back. That might be, the best situation. If you're going to have a tight end that gets behind the line, the second line of the defense, maybe have Justin Reed come up and take that guy. It's just not Nick Bolton's problem.
Yeah, and he wasn't the only thing on defense that I noticed. I thought that the Chiefs really lacked edge pressure. And on that last drive in particular for the Ravens, when they thought they had scored a touchdown to end the game, I noticed Chris Jones was out on the edge essentially every single snap of that drive.
Oh, yeah.
And I get it. Chris Jones is the Ravens offensive line was weak and they were trying to attack that matchup. And Chris Jones was unblockable, for most of this game. They had a lot of trouble trying to contain Chris Jones. But, and I get it. He's good from the edge. He moves really fast for a big guy like that. And they're trying to use him in those ways. But, man, it's like every single time we need a sack from the edge, it's like we're turning to Chris Jones. And I don't like that. I think that shows that you don't have trust in the guys that are already out at edge. Because in an ideal scenario, you want Chris Jones wreaking havoc inside, and then your edges can just do their job, and they can be the ones getting the sacks. Like that. That's the most efficient way of doing this. And instead, the Chiefs are like, all right, Chris Jones out to edge. Chris Jones out to edge. No, there's a few times, and they showed it throughout the game. Chris Collinsworth pointed it out. Chris Jones would say, oh, no, I'm taking this matchup. And he'd basically just insert himself into the play, at a different position. And he'd be like, hey, scoot over. I'm taking this guy one-on-one. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine with me. Chris Jones is good enough that I trust him to make those decisions. But that seemed like an area in which the Chiefs coaching staff was like, Chris, go out to edge. Chris, go out to edge. And I get it. He's good from there. We've seen it before. I just get really concerned that the Chiefs don't trust their edges enough. They don't trust George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, and Felix Anudike-Uzomah to win enough one-on-one to make a defensive stand there. And that's something that worried me just a little bit. Now, some people will point out that the Chiefs play Lamar Jackson a little bit differently. It's not always about getting to him as fast as possible. They kind of want to contain him just in case he decides to take off and run. So it's not you don't want to over pursue. But on that drive in particular, at the end of the game, it was very clear that Lamar Jackson was just dropping back and trying to throw the ball because they were running out of time. And so when I saw them struggling to get pressure, that kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And of course, this team's supposed to get Charles Omenihu back at some point, we hope. Yeah. But I didn't love what I saw from the edges in this game. Defensive tackles, though, and that's an area in which I've been banging the drum a little bit, Michael. You know that. I thought they should have picked someone up in the offseason, but a guy that really impressed me was Tershawn Wharton. I thought he had several good rushes in that game. He looks like maybe he has taken that next step that it once looked like he was capable of. And I had questions about it, but I was really encouraged by what I saw from Tershawn Wharton.
The only thing that I'm going to say as a small rebuttal to that is I think that on the final drive of the game, the Chiefs defense was gassed. I mean, they had been out there for a long time. And so from that standpoint, and it's also week one, like these guys didn't really play in the preseason, so they are not really in football shape. So from that standpoint, I kind of understand why they weren't maybe forcing as much pressure on that last drive as they should have. But you make a really good point. It seemed like Chris Jones was on that left side, rushing from the edge, seemingly every other play or every play. And that's not really what you love to see from the best defensive tackle in football. I would like to see him play his natural position. And I don't know if they put him there because he wanted those one-on-one matchups, or they just thought, we need Chris Jones to beat this guy so we can get to Lamar to contain him. Maybe that was the thought process, but
I think it was a mixture probably.
But even when you think about it, when Chris Jones is coming off of the left, the way that Lamar was maneuvering in the pocket, Lamar would step up and Chris Jones would be like way behind him. Now, if Chris Jones was in the middle playing in his position, he would have just ran right into Lamar Jackson. And so from that standpoint, I know you're trying to contain him, but Chris Jones, who is the scariest guy on the defense, you want him, to make contact with Lamar Jackson. And it's harder to do that when he's taking an angle from the edge.
Well, and
that's go around.
And that's what makes that difficult too, is because And that's what I'm trying to say is like they're relying on Chris Jones to be the guy that makes Lamar step up in that pocket. But then you don't have the guy to meet Lamar Jackson when he steps up because you're using him at defensive end. And because even on that strip sack that he had, I mean, he just like Lamar stepped up and Chris Jones has barely got his hand in there and was able to knock the ball out.
Yeah. And listen, Chris Jones he is such a game wrecker, but you need to have him in the right position. And I always worry about his health, but he's playing a lot of snaps, and especially really early on in the season. Like, you would like to have more breathing room and give him at least a couple snaps.
And they did have to take him out. There was one play that took him out on the last drive, and it's like Chris Jones has to sit in this situation. And I think that contributes to your point that they were probably pretty gassed. Chris Jones in particular, because he's doing all the work, man. I mean, he's the leader of this defense.
Well, I don't think Chris Jones played at all in the preseason, if I remember correctly. He had that injury. So, this was his first game. This was the first game for a lot of guys. You know, they haven't played 4 quarters of football since February of last year. So I understand why they might be a little bit slow in the fourth quarter. But, you know, defensively speaking, Josh, I really thought that they did a really good job of getting Baltimore's offense off the field. I think they would have fewer points if our offense didn't cough up the ball and make the defense stay on longer.
Well, and it happened again in this game is what I noticed is that the Ravens abandoned the run. Again, despite having Derrick Henry back there, despite Lamar Jackson being electric with the ball in his hands, when it came down to it, the Ravens abandoned the run again, and the Chiefs got them out of that comfort zone because they were up by 10 points at one point in the fourth quarter. So the Ravens were like, well, we got to throw this thing so we can catch up, and it just doesn't work for them.
That's the key to beating the Ravens. You get up by 10 and the game's basically over. Like, they cannot play from behind. It happened in that AFC Championship game. They got up by a final score, or they got up by a score of 17-10, and they coasted on that lead for the entire game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Ravens are not good at playing from behind, and they can't play to their strengths when you get up on them big because and that's what causes Lamar to get eager and throw these interceptions that he otherwise wouldn't throw.
Yeah. And listen, that's a really good thing for the Chiefs. My only concern, it's very weird thinking, but I worry that Lamar Jackson's like finally going to figure it out. And especially now that they lost in the regular season, I don't want to say it gives them even more motivation to win because they lost in last year's AFC Championship game. But I do worry about him maybe figuring it out or finally beating Mahomes. And quite honestly, that's not really a world I want to live in where the Chiefs lose to the Ravens in the playoffs. But it really just seems like Baltimore is a mess offensively. They don't really know what their identity is. They couldn't run the ball. You know, they couldn't throw the ball. And their offensive line was garbage. So they've got a lot of work to do before they're even in the same breath as the Chiefs.
Yeah, that's the thing that you also got to worry about if you're a Ravens fan is the offensive line. I mean, it was rough. And the Chiefs they only sacked the Ravens one time, but the Chiefs, Chris Jones, I should say, was getting in the backfield all night. Tershawn Morton a couple times too. I shouted him out earlier. They were getting in the backfield pretty much all night, even if it didn't result in a sack. It was throwing them off.
Oh, yeah. And listen, Chris Jones is going to carry the load this year for this defensive line. You'd like to see George Karlaftis step up, and you just paid Mike Dan in the offseason. So maybe he gives you a little something off the edge, but it's going to be important that Chris Jones is not pulling this 8-man sled by himself.
Yeah, for sure. And you're going to have to get more help from the second level of the defense, obviously, because linebackers, Nick Bolton in particular, rough game in coverage. But I thought Leo Chanel was great. He was a standout from this game defensively, and this is his first year of like really getting that increased snap count with the departure of Willie Gay, and I thought he looked fantastic. He helped to stop several runs that otherwise would have went for a big gain, and he just plays so strong. He's basically like having sometimes an extra defensive lineman out there because of the way he uses his hands and how much strength that he has. You know, nowadays you see so many linebackers coming into the league that are lighter than ever, and coaches and GMs want them to be able to run fast and cover. And then here you have Leo Chanel, who's kind of a little more of a mix of your old school thumper kind of linebacker that just plays really big, come up in the run game, attacking the quarterback. And it's a nice change.
He's a big man. Listen, he is a big man that can move. I remember when he came out of the draft, he had one of the highest athletic scores that I've seen. Like, it was like a 9.99 or something ridiculous like that. And it is really translated well to the NFL. And I think the best part about Leo is he has steadily gotten better and better every year he has been in this defense. It went from a guy that would see the field every once in a while on first and second downs to, okay, he's playing a lot more in his second year, and now he's damn near the starter. So, like, the progression that he has made in this defense and the, player progression is just unreal. And it's just unbelievable what Spags has done with some of these guys in the defense that, probably wouldn't have made an impact under anybody else. He just finds a way to utilize them, and they've turned out to be really good pieces for this defense.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I think, there were things to not like about this defense, but for the most part, it was a strong performance. And also something that we talked about before the game that was a concern to us was cornerback too. That issue really didn't show up. I thought the cornerbacks played exceptionally well. And I know Trent McDuffie allowed one early catch to Zay Flowers, but then after that, pretty much shut him down for the rest of the game. Jalen Watson looked pretty good. I know some people were worried about him after that last preseason game. I really think that was just about getting him reps to get him in shape. He looked fine in this game. I thought it was a really good game from the secondary, and there's a lot of good things to build off of. And typically, Spags' defenses start a little slow, but they look fine to me, and I think they're only going to get better as the season goes on.
The past 2 seasons, the Chiefs' defense has been legit from the start, and if anything, they get better as they go on. I will say I'm not completely ready to write off the secondary quite yet. I think that since Lamar Jackson can't throw the football downfield, we still have that problem at number 2 cornerback. I don't think it's as big of an issue as everybody else was saying, but let's not say, okay, all of our problems are solved because our second cornerback locked down against Lamar.
Yeah, and that's not even what I'm saying. Like, I'm sure there's going to be a game or two where it's like, eesh, they weren't ready for that. But they were fine in week 1. I think there's still a lot of young guys in that secondary that are going to get better as the season goes along. And there was positive things to build off of in this one. And I mean, yeah, they played fine. That first drive, that's what I was going to say. That first drive, the Ravens really marched down the field on us, got us on a couple 3rd and longs, and it's like, gosh, we could have gotten off the field there. But after that first drive, they made adjustments, and the Ravens really weren't that good. They didn't move the ball all that well until that final drive in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that you could chalk the first drive up to the Chiefs defense not knowing what to expect, and they settled in. And then the last one, the defense was gassed. And outside of those 2 instances, the Chiefs defense was as good as you could have asked it to be. And so I think that this defense is still young. They're still growing, and it's week 1. Nobody's going to be their final product in week 1. And so if this is what we're seeing in just week 1, I think the ceiling of this defense is going to be like top 3 in the NFL. And that's a very exciting thing.
And that's why I laugh at that comment that Isaiah Likely made after the game saying, this was not our best. And if the Chiefs think this is what they're going to see come playoff time, they're sadly mistaken. I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, well, do you think this was the Chiefs' best? Because it certainly was not. And they didn't even have Hollywood Brown or Charles Omenihu. Those are 2 very key pieces on both sides of the football that they will have, we're pretty sure, by the postseason. So, I mean,
and Travis Kelce had a quiet game too.
Well, okay. And let's talk about that. I'm ready to talk about the offense. That's a good segue, Michael. So obviously Travis Kelce had a quiet game, as you just pointed out. He had, I have it right here, actually, 3 catches for 34 yards. And people are like, man, Travis Kelce was quiet tonight. Is this not exactly what we wanted, though? Like, after watching last year, a game where Travis Kelce isn't even that big of a factor and the offense is functional. You scored 27 points when the magic number we talked about last year was like 25. They hit that. They won the game because that's the magic number when you have a defense that is this good and this talented. We want games where Travis Kelce doesn't have to carry the entire offense, and you can just throw Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice out there and be like, we got this. And those young guys have this. And Travis Kelce, even when he's not catching the ball, he's drawing a lot of attention from the defense still, and it just opens things up all over the field. And this is just the perfect scenario, Michael. I think because I saw someone on Twitter specifically talking about how Travis Kelce has not really been a factor in this game. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a good thing when the offense is humming like this and Travis Kelce hasn't done anything yet.
Listen, Travis Kelce's time will come. Like, there is no doubt in my mind that there's going to be a game where Travis Kelce goes for a buck 15 and 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns. That will come. But Josh, like you said, we wanted some of the pressure to be taken off a guy that's 35 years old. And so the Chiefs went out and they addressed that issue. And now Travis Kelce has the luxury of being the best safety blanket on the planet. He can literally go out there, run routes, block, do his thing, and he's always going to be open. But now he's a guy that isn't going to have to take, 15 to 20 hits a night because he's only going to get 8 or 9 receptions. And that is perfectly fine. And I think he'd sign up for that in a heartbeat because, listen, he signed that 2-year deal. And while I think that he might be done after these 2 years, listen, man, if he's not taking a bunch of hits, maybe Travis Kelce's sitting up there after the Chiefs three-peat, and maybe they, make some noise in this 4th season. And maybe he's saying to himself,
one more year.
I've got my girl, and I think I could play one more year or a couple more years because he's not taking all of those earth-shattering hits that he's, used to taking. So I think this is only a positive thing for not only Travis Kelce, but for the Chiefs.
Well, you talk about him retiring maybe in the next 2 years, and I think that's important to note when talking about the fact that Kansas City signed tight end Noah Gray to a 3-year extension right before this game. Some people were confused by it. They're like, Noah Gray getting a 3-year extension? Like, what? That's kind of
random
for a backup tight end. What is he getting? $6 million per year seems a little rich for a backup tight end. But here's kind of how I look at it, and here's why it makes sense. If Travis Kelce retires in the next 2 years, I don't think Jared Wiley is just stepping in a place of Travis Kelce. I don't think Noah Gray even is stepping into the place of Travis Kelce. Most likely, it's going to be a combination of guys that are going to try to replace Travis Kelce, right? The Chiefs think they had that combination, and so they're just signing Noah Gray to simply keep him around for when that happens, because when Travis Kelce leaves, Noah Gray will be through his rookie contract, right? He was coming up on the end of his deal. And so if Travis Kelce retires, let's say in 2 years, you have Jared Wiley and you have Noah Gray in that room for the foreseeable future. And I think that's a really smart thing to have, is those 2 guys in that tight end room.
And if it's anything that we've learned, Noah Gray has become a really reliable pass catching option for this offense. Like, he has been a sneaky good target. And even in that first game, he had a couple catches. So I think that, for the contract that they gave him, it's not very expensive. And we're thinking the long game right now. And Noah Gray could be a really good target for Mahomes for the next 5 years. And he's just, keeping that continuity going. And he has that relationship already built. And Noah Gray's gotten the call in some pretty big moments. So I like the signing. And I think that, you got to keep that offense intact as much as you can.
Yeah, I'm fully behind the extension. I also saw that it was very cheap to cut him in that, or after that second year. There's no downside to that deal. I think having him in the tight end room with the uncertainty of Travis Kelce's future is a very good thing. As far as the other pass catchers in this game, Juju Smith-Schuster obviously made his comeback in this game. He had 1 drop, and people are like, oh my God, Juju. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even care about that drop. I'm just so much more comfortable having him out there as opposed to Sky Moore or Kadarius Toney. Sky Moore might as well have been inactive in this game. I think he got like a couple snaps. And the thing about Juju is it just feels right having him on this team. And he was also instrumental in blocking in this game. Even MVS last year was a solid blocking receiver, and he's no longer here. Xavier Worthy's not really a guy you want to have blocking on a screen. You're going to want him with the ball on a screen, especially after watching him in that first game. The speed and the acceleration is just incredible. And we'll talk about him and Rice because I feel like you got to kind of talk about them together. They were awesome. But I'm still fully behind Juju being on this team. And Justin Watson also did his thing in this game. I want to say he had 1 or 2 timely catches. So I thought it was a fairly good game from the pass catchers as a whole.
Josh, I think that we saw in just one game, a better offense than we saw all of last season. This is what we were begging for, an offense that could actually push the ball down the field. And they had some issues cashing it in, but when have the Chiefs offense not had issues cashing it in? So
it's also week 1. Like I'm not rushing to judgment there. And again, you don't have Hollywood Brown, but you have Xavier Worthy, who we've already seen the moments. And I said it in our preview, Michael, and I've been saying that I think he's going to have a big impact on this team as a rookie. You're already seeing it. I mean, you don't have 2 touchdowns in your debut by accident. I mean, I think that is a sign of good things to come.
Wait, really quickly, Josh, I just want to throw this out there for everyone to listen to. Xavier Worthy in one game has more career touchdowns than Sky Moore.
Yeah, and that's the thing is Sky Moore, we didn't see those moments with him, and now the Chiefs had essentially drafted over him. He's no longer a part of the future plans. I think we can say that. And Xavier Worthy, he's a guy, man, like you've seen the moments, like you've seen the flashes that indicate he's going to be a good player, and the speed is already just game breaking, and defenses are like, oh my God, we have to worry about this now. And then because of Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, he just already looks so much more mature in year 2. I don't think he had a single drop. That was something he struggled with as a rookie. 7 catches for 103 yards. He was a menace over the middle. Like just the slant with him is automatic. I mean, it's automatic, Michael.
And because Xavier Worthy is pulling all of that attention from the middle of the field down deep. And guess what? If they decide to, split up between Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce's going to beat just about anybody in single coverage.
And that's without even mentioning Hollywood, who brings that same effect as Xavier Worthy, where you just have to take him seriously, him and his speed. Also, the one play, I think it was our last drive before we punted, needed a first down, didn't get it, and Mahomes caught his own pass. He was going to Rashee Rice. Rice was open. Rice was going to get a first down, if not for the fact that the pass was batted by a Ravens defender. But Rashee Rice was also open because 2 guys were following Xavier Worthy. And that's just something that you're going to see all year long, and it's going to lead to big plays.
And I'll tell you what, he's going to break off for a couple big plays, even when they are guarding him like that. Like he's just too fast to consistently be detained like that. And so I really like the addition of Xavier Worthy. And if he's doing this in just week 1, I mean, I'm not going to predict that he's going to have like a 15 touchdown season. That's just ridiculous. But he's a guy that I think my predictions for what he was going to produce in 2024 have changed a lot, because he could have legitimately, number 2 wide receiver goals by mid-season.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I mean, I was already like on the Xavier Worthy train that he was going to have a big year as a rookie. I just think I always point to the fact that as a freshman at Texas, he was all SEC, Big 12 freshman, and he just has produced no matter the step up in competition. And I just think he has that sort of makings of a player that's just
the it factor.
Yeah,
it's the it.
Yeah, he's got the it factor, and he just produces, and he's a good football player. I mean, you can see it already.
Oh, yeah. And listen, if that is just a sneak peek of what we're going to see in the offense this year, oh, man. I mean, we're going to have a lot of fun Sundays, because, we aren't going to have the nail-biting stress that this team can't move the ball on offense anymore, because, in one play, Patrick Mahomes can dial up something 50 yards downfield and change the game. I mean, this is just making a team that is already pretty hard to beat just even more difficult to beat. And now, if they're down by a field goal, this team had no big playability last year.
Yeah.
This team could legitimately score similarly to what they did a couple of years ago, where they were scoring like 14 points in a minute and a half. Like, that is how explosive this offense is.
Yeah, and it's just encouraging to see how well they played in week 1 this year relative to last year. I mean, they're already ahead of where they were at this time last year. And yes, there are some execution problems here and there that I noticed. I also thought Andy Reid got a little bit conservative. I remember on the last drive before they ultimately punted back to the Ravens to give them a chance to tie or win the game, there was a really lazy play call that I didn't like, where they handed it off to Carson Steele. And they're like, oh, Carson Steele, like, why don't you go ahead and get a touch here, because this game's over. And it's like, well, hold on, it's not over. And then the play went for negative yards. that was a wasted play from Andy Reid. I did not understand what that was right there. And I like Carson Steele, want to see him get some playing time, but that was just not the situation to put him out there, not in that spot. Go ahead.
In addition to that, one thing I found very interesting is that Samaje Perine played and got a carry in this game. And the guy basically walked in from the street a couple weeks ago, like a week ago, and he was already playing on this week 1 roster. And so maybe he takes a bigger role, with, Pacheco, always needing help behind him, and Carson Steele, he's still trying to prove himself. But I think I was pretty surprised that Perine played pretty much right away after just getting signed.
Yeah, Mahomes just missed him on a 3rd down that it almost looked like he would have scored if he had caught it, because there was almost no one in front of him. He had the angle. Mahomes just barely misplaced it and threw it a little early. He wasn't expecting it, but I suspect that Perine will still be a big factor in the passing game as the season progresses. But I mean, look, there were some execution issues here and there. They weren't great on 3rd down. They were not great in the red zone, but the bare bones of a functional offense is there, unlike last year. Like, you can see the potential. They moved the ball just fine, 7.1 yards per play. I mean, this is an offense that we know who the trusted players are, right? And we didn't know who the trusted players were in last year's offense, or at least from the receiver position. That was the big weakness, right? And that's also why I picked the Ravens to win this game. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, well, you picked the Ravens. And I did. And that's because I thought there was going to be execution problems like that would lead to the Ravens ultimately coming back and winning this. And they almost did. Like, if the Ravens had gotten that touchdown, converted on the 2-point conversion, and won the game, I would have been saying it, Michael, like those execution problems from the, one of those stupid early season losses from the Chiefs that you can always expect. That's what I would have said. And we were very close to having that happen. But luckily they won.
Oh, man. And the whole thing, like, oh, if Harbaugh went for 2, they motioned to him on the sideline, and he was already holding up the 2. So, like, they would have definitely gone for it. And like you said, based on the way they marched down the field, they probably would have gotten it. And so that would have been a rough way to lose at home in back-to-back home openers. But we don't got to worry about it. The Chiefs were able to hold on to win by an inch, literally by an Isaiah Likely foot. And so the Chiefs got very fortunate in this game to escape it with a win. They play Cincinnati this week. And I don't know if you watched that Bengals-Patriots.
Yeah, I did.
Goodness gracious. We might put 40 on that team.
I'm saying, man, Joe Burrow doesn't look the same. And that injury that he had last year, it kind of went under the radar. It was like a wrist/elbow injury that he had last year, right? And I remember a couple former NFL trainers or doctors were talking about it, and they said this is an injury that like could change his career, could change the way he throws the football. And I'm just saying, man, he didn't look great throwing the football in that week 1 game. He just looks off. And it's not even like T. Higgins didn't play, obviously, but he had Jamar Chase, and that Bengals offense has always been kind of loaded. It didn't look good. And Bengals fans will use the excuse, and I'm just going to say, hey, we won the Super Bowl last year with MVS, Kadarius Toney, and Justin Watson. Like, I don't want to hear it.
Oh, yeah. And listen, the Bengals always give us fits, so it's not a guaranteed win.
No, not at all.
Man, that Bengals team does not look anything. I mean, they might as well put a backup quarterback in if that's what Joe Burrow's going to play like. And so, I mean, the Chiefs are getting really fortunate. Like, again, they still have to play this regular season, but when you're looking at the conference, who is going to face the Chiefs and rise up? Like, I don't think it's Buffalo. I don't think it's Baltimore. I don't think it's Cincinnati.
Houston's the big one, I think. They're the sexy pick this year, and they did look good in their game against the Colts, but
very young, very
yes, inexperienced. Stroud also threw a bad interception in that game I saw, but he got bailed out by a defensive holding. So, I kind of feel like the Houston Texans are the hot new team, but whatever they do this year, even if they were to make it to the AFC Championship, which is very possible, even if that happens, I just feel like they're going to be one of those teams where it's like they're a year early. Like, I wouldn't doubt that CJ Stroud will win a Super Bowl at some point in his career. I think they will be a successful team, but they're just not ready to overthrow the Chiefs.
Yeah.
I know it's very early, but
like everyone says that, like, oh, Josh Allen, Lamar, they're bound to get a Super Bowl eventually. Are they? I mean, you don't know. Like at this point, they haven't been able to get by the dragon that is Mahomes.
Yeah.
He's only getting better. His team's only getting better, and their teams are only getting worse. So listen, I mean, it's
the
hard.
Bengals can't pay anybody, man. Like
that too.
Like they can't pay anyone. T. Higgins wants a new contract. Jamar Chase wants a new contract. They had the one defensive lineman that requested a trade because he wants money, and the owner. And we warned the Bengals this. I mean, their owner is known to be cheap, and it's coming up on a lot of players' deals, and all of a sudden everyone's demanding a new contract, and things are not going well in Cincy.
No, the culture's not great there. From what we're seeing, just from the media.
And they have to walk across the street. Like they have to walk across a busy city street just to get to practice. Did you see that video?
No, I haven't. What?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like even their facilities are just.
I remember they practiced outside a couple of years ago, but I think they got an indoor stadium or a practice facility finally.
Yeah, man. I saw they had to walk like across a busy street to get there. Now maybe that's only for practicing outside, and that's what they did. But yeah, it was kind of funny to see how, like, could you imagine you're just on your way to work and you see Jamar Chase crossing the street in his Bengals uniform? Kind of funny.
Yeah. I mean, Cincinnati is just such a weird place, man. But yeah, no, it should be a really good game. And listen, I think that we're, another game away from starting, 2-0, and that is a really good starting point.
And this is the difficult stretch of the Chiefs' schedule is early on when you face the Ravens, you face the Bengals, and if you can get through these first few weeks being undefeated, then the rest of the schedule really opens up for the Chiefs to do well this year. I mean, they were going to do well regardless. I mean, you can basically guarantee that they win 11, 12 games every year. Even last year when they were terrible, they still ended up finishing with 11 wins, I think it was, maybe even 12. But yeah, I mean, this is the difficult part of the schedule, and if you can get through that, then you got to feel really good as a Chiefs fan.
Get that one seed, the home playoff bye,
yes.
And
you may say cruise. Yes, yeah. After the bye week, you can just put it on cruise control. I wanted to talk about a couple things from around the NFL over the weekend. We kind of touched on some of the other games. One thing, and I saw you made a video about this. I'm glad you did, Michael. I'm glad you're bringing attention to this because this is just one of those things that irks me. I can't believe I'm talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire again, especially when he's not even playing right now, and it feels like I'm kicking someone while they're down. But here's the thing. J.K. Dobbins, right? Over the offseason, the Kansas City Chiefs brought him in the building to potentially sign him. Not even 24 hours later, they re-signed Clyde Edwards-Helaire, apparently using J.K. Dobbins as leverage to bring back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They brought in J.K. Dobbins to ask what his price was. Whatever it was, the Chiefs said, it's whatever. We feel CEH is more worth it. So they went with him. J.K. Dobbins, he later signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. Okay, that's where he is now. Signed there on a cheap one-year deal. He wanted to sign in Kansas City, though. I mean, obviously the interest was there. And I said that the Chiefs should add a veteran running back in free agency. Fast forward here to week 1. J.K. Dobbins in his Los Angeles Chargers debut runs for 135 yards.
On 10 carries, Josh.
Looks fantastic. Gets the game ball from Jim Harbaugh. Almost said John.
They're the same person at this point. Like I just
gets the game ball from Jim Harbaugh. And I'm sitting here thinking we chose CEH over him. Why? Like what? CEH is damn near unrosterable. And I said, look, I like J.K. Dobbins. I think we should bring him in. I mean, I understand he has the injury issues because he barely played any games while in Baltimore. But I was looking at his stats, and I'm saying, man, look at how many touchdowns he has, like the amount of times he's gotten in the end zone and how little he's played. So he's played in a total of 25 career games, has found the end zone a total of 14 times in 25 games. That's pretty good. Like that's pretty productive. And I said, look, bring him in. He has more upside than CEH. He has more juice, more speed, more athleticism. Like this is a no-brainer. What are we doing? Choose CEH over him, and you see him playing now for not just any other team, but a division rival, one that people are kind of hoping that can challenge the Chiefs for the AFC West this year. And J.K. Dobbins looks pretty damn good, and I am upset, Michael. I am upset that the Chiefs did not bring him in when no one else wanted him, and he was begging for you to sign him. And we chose CEH instead, who's not even playing. I don't get it.
I think the frustrating part is I'm not going to lie. I was one of those people that didn't want JK. I thought he had too many, injury problems. And listen, those injury problems are a week away from being just as big of an issue. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not playing, and he probably isn't going to play. And J.K. Dobbins in 1 week displayed some of the burst and athleticism and the speed that he showed in college. And so that is a tough pill to swallow if you're Brett Veach in the Chiefs front office. If he turns in to be the J.K. Dobbins of old, where he is just electric running the football, that's a tough pill for the Chiefs to swallow, because they could have added him, as our number 2 or 3 running back. And for depth, if he does
I think, and this might be a hot take, I think when he is healthy, let me reiterate, when he is healthy, I think he's better than Pacheco. That's just my opinion. I think the things that you saw him do, even in that week 1 game, you don't see Pacheco. Pacheco doesn't really make guys miss like that. And Pacheco doesn't really break a lot of tackles. Pacheco's good. He's solid. I like Pacheco. I think Dobbins, when he's healthy, is better, though. I think he's the most talented running back you would have had. And I like Carson Steele, too, and I think he's going to be a big part of the offense this year. But I watched J.K. Dobbins and what he did in week 1, and I'm thinking, man, you could have had him for nothing. And you chose CEH instead.
I wonder if he wanted something bigger, or maybe he wanted a role guaranteed that the Chiefs just didn't feel comfortable giving him. I'm not sure, but right now it does not look good. Now, if he gets injured next week, or he just kind of fades back into being, the hurt J.K. Dobbins, Chiefs didn't really miss out on much. But as of right now, after week 1, 10 carries, 135 yards and a touchdown, and he's making guys miss, and he's, showing that crazy burst. He had one of his runs go for like 19 miles an hour. Like, he was ridiculous. And so if that is what we see moving forward from Dobbins, then it is a bad move by the Chiefs. Like, he was in your building and you failed to bring him in. Like, it's almost like when the Chiefs failed to get Melvin Ingram and then they had to trade for him later on. I don't think that the Chargers would trade with us. I don't think we'd trade with the Chargers for him, but you had a chance to get him and you failed to do so. And right now it doesn't look very good.
Nah. And look, I don't want to sit here and act like it's going to be the difference between winning a Super Bowl or anything like that, or that like J.K. Dobbins is going to come back to haunt the Chiefs. I mean, maybe he does in a individual regular season game or something like that. But
definitely ultimately playoffs.
Yeah, ultimately, if the Chiefs don't win the Super Bowl, I don't think it's going to be because of J.K. Dobbins, but it's just one of those moves that just, to me at least, felt so obvious, and you let him go to a division rival where he's now tearing it up. And it's just, I don't know. It annoys me, especially for CEH. And look, the Chiefs are doing right by CEH, considering what he's going through, and he's still getting paid and stuff like that, and I understand. But at the time, in free agency, it didn't really make any sense.
At a certain point, you're going to have to move on from guys like CEH. And the time should have been now, but I understand why they didn't drop him when he's going through all the things that he's going through. But, man, I mean, Dobbins, even if he, wasn't performing like he was yesterday, he's playing, and that's something that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not doing. So, like, just from that aspect alone, it's kind of a tough thing to overlook.
Yeah, have to agree, but we'll move on. It is what it is. He's not on this team. We have to roll with the players that we have. Michael, last little segment, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But any other games stand out to you from over the weekend in this week 1 of the NFL season? I have to say that it looks like the Panthers are going to be pretty freaking terrible again this year. Got to feel bad for those fans.
Yeah, the Panthers, they might as well just pack it in right now. I will say the one game that I was watching and looking forward to more really than any other game this Sunday was Raiders-Chargers. I watched that game very closely. And even though the Chargers won, the Raiders and the Chargers are both dog shit. They are bad. They are bad football teams. And the Raiders, I mean, the Raiders fans this offseason, they were, sipping that hopium. Like they thought that this team was going to be, competing in the AFC West. Seeing the life just drained from that fan base after a horrible loss on the road in Los Angeles. I mean, they put up a touchdown. They couldn't move the ball offensively. Gardner Minshew looked like Gardner Minshew, and their defense really wasn't that good. So it's like, I feel really good about the Chiefs' chances in this division. I understand that it's week 1, but the fact that, both teams looked, just not good. Like the Chargers won, but the Chargers weren't a good football team on paper coming into it. So I think the Chiefs are not going to have a cakewalk through the division, but like this is going to be another year where the division is just, don't shit the bed and you'll be fine.
Yeah, because the Broncos aren't going to be a threat with Bo Nix. I'll tell you that right now. He looked pretty terrible. How about Tyreek Hill getting arrested and then catching an 80-yard touchdown pass and then pretending to get arrested in the touchdown celebration? That's just wild, isn't it?
That is crazy. Like, I feel like the Tyreek Hill drama has only like escalated times 100 since he left Kansas City, which maybe that's a really interesting thing to mention about Kansas City, how stuff kind of stays internally. Mm-hmm. But like, no, to get basically put in handcuffs and detained and then go out there and just catch an 80-yard bomb and take it to the house. He's the best wide receiver in football. And I really don't think there's any debate about it.
Yeah. And I missed that connection. I tweeted that out on my personal, and someone was like, how can you say this when we've won like 2 Super Bowls? And it's like, I'm not saying we need Tyreek Hill. It's just I missed the connection between him and Mahomes. It was the most
electric.
It was the most unstoppable thing in football. And the Chiefs chose to get rid of that. And look, it was a gutsy decision, and you have to give credit to Brett Veach because of what success we've had. But I'll always miss that guy. And I still think that he comes back 1 year before he retires. He comes back for one last ride with Patrick after his contract in Miami is up. I still think that happens.
I think the funniest thing, and then we'll get out of here, the funniest thing about that arrest is he told the media or he told somebody that he wanted to be a cop after his career ended. Like,
really?
Tyreek was like,
I didn't even see that.
Let me try to find the exact quote, but like Tyreek Hill just says stuff, and like it is just so fun.
Whenever I saw him get arrested, I just kind of laughed because I'm like, Tyreek is always like caught up in something. Like it's just always something with him, but you just kind of have to put up with it because he's Tyreek Hill. And I don't know. I love him, and he's funny to me, and I think he's a cool dude. So
Tyreek Hill says he wants to be a police officer one day. What if I wasn't Tyreek Hill? Like, I wanted to be a cop one day. I've got a state trooper hat, all that. So I've got a lot of respect for cops.
Really? I didn't even know he said that.
Tyreek Hill, future law enforcement officer.
Could you imagine getting pulled over by Tyreek Hill? You're not out racing him. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You're definitely not beating
him. You're getting caught. Yeah. If you crash your car in a high-speed chase and you get out to try and outrun Tyreek, good luck to you.
You also got 10 kids chasing you too, so there's no way. There's no way you're beating it.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. That's funny. All right, well that's a good stopping point. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode today. Luckily, Michael and I were able to find a window to get this out for you guys because we're recording this pretty late. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. Make sure you hit the notification bell for new episodes. But before we sign off, Michael, where can the people find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at KC Sports Report. You basically know where to find me at this point. I will say, as of today, September 9th, 2024, I've cracked. I just started a TikTok. I never thought I'd see this day. But you can go check me out on TikTok, KC_Sports Report. I'm basically just going to be posting like short form content like reels and stuff like that. I didn't think I'd reach this point where I have a TikTok, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So you can go check me out on TikTok at KC_Sports Report. But definitely follow along for the Kingdom Crew podcast all season long. We are going to be here each and every week. We've been grinding content for the last month or so, and it's only going to ramp up as the Chiefs continue to go on that quest for the three-peat. So you do not want to miss it. Subscribe to Josh's channel if you haven't already. I don't know what you're doing if you haven't, but yeah, definitely stick along for this journey because it's going to be a good one.
There you guys have it. Make sure you check the description down below for all of Michael's stuff as always, and we will see you all in the next one. Go Chiefs!